Hi everybody. Last year I shared this court rules British MI5 agents can murder, kidnap and torture, and this was a court ruling that they can commit these crimes as long as they don't get caught. The policy itself offers no legal immunity. So basically, if they murder somebody in Britain and the police are investigating and they find out that they've been murdered, then they had no protection under the law. That has now changed. It is now the law that MI5 agents can murder, kidnap and torture. And here is a BBC article covering the recent vote in Parliament, which over 300 British MPs abstained from, most of them Labour MPs, by order of Keir Starmer. Every single one of them want hauling up on charges of treason, really, because that's what it amounts to. The British people are sovereign citizens. This is a democracy, and they have put everybody at risk, and all the MPs that voted in favour of this bill equally need to be investigated and charged with conspiracy to commit harm against British citizens. Now, what it basically means, the new rules for MI5 and police to authorise crime. So this now includes the police, not just MI5 but the police. And who else are authorised to commit these crimes against British people, secret crimes, using covert agents? Well, a covert agent can be anybody that you employ. Okay, you find somebody who's a psychopath, I want you to go and kill this person, or they've got some information, go and torture them, kill them, do it for us. It's a matter of national security. Okay, so MI5 can do this, the police, immigration and border officers, HM Revenue and Customs, Serious Fraud Office, UK Military Forces, Ministry of Justice, investigations in prisons, Competition and Markets Authority, the Environment Agency, Financial Conduct Authority, Food Standards Agency, the Gambling Commission, and Medicines and Healthcare Regulation Authorities. So, the last one, Medicine and Healthcare Regulation Authorities. What's going to be happening to people like myself who are sharing the honest truth, facts about these new CRISPR gene editing vaccines and advising people not to have an experimental vaccine unless they have absolute evidence unless it's been issued under licence and it's been through all the regular tests, and that they have a guarantee of liability on part of the providers, the people injecting them, the people providing the vaccines, the people creating the vaccines. That's a perfectly reasonable, lawful, sane advice that any medic until now would have given. But apparently everything's changed because of coronavirus. But let's be clear, we've lived for coronavirus for centuries. Coronavirus is the common cold. Coronavirus is a variety of strains of flu-type viruses. COVID-19 is the latest addition. All these people testing positive for coronavirus, that's what they're tested positive for, a coronavirus. The tests are, according to all the evidence to date, 90% false positives, because actually they're not people, although they've tested positive, those people do not even have a shred of COVID-19 in them. What the test has picked up is that the person is successfully fighting off a cold or flu virus, or they have antibodies to a cold or flu virus because they've had a cold recently, or possibly they might have COVID-19. This is the fact of it. But Medicines Healthcare Regulation Authority, can they go and kidnap and kill, torture and kill doctors who come out and speak? This is tyranny. This is tyranny. We are a nation that does not have the death penalty. There is no death penalty in Britain. So can somebody please explain to me, as a British citizen, how all these agencies are now at liberty to hire covert agents to go around kidnapping and murdering and killing people, torturing and killing people. And they can say, oh, well, it's in the interest of national security, but who's going to know? Who's going to know if their loved one has suddenly disappeared? Who's going to be there to hold them to account, to say, well, prove to us, prove that this was an issue of national security? This is absolutely effing outrageous. And I don't know any country on this planet that would tolerate this. Unless there was some kind of, you know, like I say, North Korea might have to tolerate it because they haven't got a democracy, because they don't have human rights, because they don't live by common law. Soviet Russia, they might have been able to get away with it. Basically, what this is doing is giving how many authorities in Britain the right to do exactly what was done to Mr. Khashoggi by the Saudi intelligence. Because they can do this in Britain and anywhere in the world. It is absolutely, I mean, people, what is wrong with people? Are you so mesmerised? Are you so scared of COVID-19? I tell you, COVID-19 is absolutely nothing compared to the powers that this tyrannical cabal squatting at number 10 on strength of what we lawfully suspect is a rigged postal vote election that gave them their landslide. How many times do we have to look at the evidence staring us in the face while Donald Trump and co go crazy about 9 discarded mail ballots found in a bin or a ditch or somewhere? They've got the FBI investigating. Well, who's investigating this for the British people? The amount of evidence here. And this is the kind of filth that this government has now legislated. Power for informants to commit crimes is ruled unlawful. The judgment, only narrowly in the government's favour, prompted the decision to create a new law. Because, as stated in the article, the original article, it did not mean, the ruling from the court did not mean anyone involved was immune from prosecution. But the government has now taken steps to say, well, yes, you are actually immune from prosecution because we've created this new bill. Security officials will not say which crimes they will consider authorising, because that could lead to terrorists and other serious criminals working out who is working undercover. But the legislation stresses agencies must not breach the Human Rights Act, which requires the government to protect life. What? MI5 agents can kidnap, kidnap and torture. Where does any of that come into the Human Rights Act? Isn't that exactly what the BBC, the BBC talking with forked tongue as usual, not giving people the full facts? Because as it states here, the unprecedented legislation to authorise and oversee crimes comes after years of unclear rules. See, the major UK court ruling last year found that while MI5 had implied power to authorise crimes, it did not mean anyone involved was immune from prosecution. The judgment, only narrowly in the government's favour, prompted the decision to create the new law. The new law saying they can commit those crimes and be immune from prosecution. That's the whole point of it. Where does human rights come into any of this? Where does it? Listen to this lady in Parliament. And, you know, look at this. The strength it takes to deliver such a banging speech in front of absolute hostility. Absolute hostility. She received hostility for speaking out for people's human rights and the right of law and decency, and for this country to continue to denounce the death penalty and torture.
An Irish lawyer in Belfast, sat at his kitchen table to have dinner with his wife and 3 children. As they ate, 2 gunmen burst through the door. They entered the room and shot Mr. Finucane 14 times. He was killed by a loyalist paramilitary group that then, as the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, admitted in 2011, was acting in complicity with British security services. Far from stopping Mr. Finucane's murder, the Prime Minister described, and I quote, the shocking levels of state collusion in Mr. Finucane's murder. His family are still owed a public inquiry into the murder. Deeply troubling acts of state agents like the Finucane case are not isolated. In 2010, it came to light that for 40 years, Britain's police had run covert operations spying on thousands of civilians. More than 1,000 political groups were spied on. Overwhelmingly, it was left-wing, anti-racist, and climate justice groups that were spied on, with just 3 far-right groups included on the list. The Sky Cops revelations have shown that police operatives deceived women into sexual relationships, and that even spying on grieving families seeking justice, including the parents of Stephen Lawrence. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill must be opposed. It places no limits on the crimes that state agents can be authorised to commit. It doesn't prohibit torture, it doesn't prohibit murder, it doesn't prohibit sexual violence. Instead, all it requires is that authorising officers themselves believe the conduct is appropriate, that is necessary by broadly defined criteria, and that it meets requirements that might be imposed by an order by the Secretary of State. Even the FBI expressly bans operatives from certain criminal conduct, but this bill doesn't ban any type of criminal conduct for British state agents. And the grounds upon which the authorisations can be granted are ill-defined and wide-ranging. Not just national security, but also, and I quote, to prevent disorder and to promote the interests of the economic well-being of the United Kingdom. This has rightly raised alarm bells from trade unions like my union Unite and justice campaigns like the All Grieve Truth and Justice campaign, who fear that these powers could be used to interfere with the legitimate activities of trade unions. And the bill grants these powers to a dizzying array of agencies, not just intelligence agencies and the police, but the Competition and Markets Authority, the Gambling Commission, and the Environment Agency, just to name a few. The oversight for authorisation of potentially serious crimes is scandalously weak. There are no provisions in this bill for warrants or independent judicial approval. Instead, authorisation would be granted internally. This means that incredibly serious crimes could be authorised with less oversight than what is currently required for phone tapping or police searches. And Madam Deputy Speaker, as the human rights group Reprieve have noted, survivors of the Sky Cop scandal have sought justice through the courts for abuses that they suffered. But this bill will block future claims being brought forward, since it outlaws civil action against authorised activities. This is utterly unconscionable. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the bill's defence, the government claims that public authorities are bound by the Human Rights Act, and for that reason, the prohibition against crimes like torture are guarded against. But in reality, this offers no protection against agent criminality because in the government's view, the Human Rights Act does not apply to crimes committed by covert agents. As the government told the Investigatory Powers Tribunal in November 2019 in tasking agents, and again, I quote, "The state is not the instigator of that activity and cannot be treated as somehow responsible for it." According to the government's own standards, therefore, the bill would not place any limits on the crimes agents could be authorised to commit. Not to torture, not to murder, not to sexual violence. Let's progress. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill marks the latest step in a frightening descent into a growing authoritarianism coming from this government. In the past 2 weeks, it has proposed the effective decriminalisation of torture for British soldiers overseas, the shipping of asylum seekers more than 4,000 miles away to be imprisoned on Ascension Island, the ban on anti-capitalist teaching materials in schools, and now this, licensing undercover agents to commit torture, sexual violence, and murder. Madam Deputy Speaker, this descent into authoritarianism should be a concern to us all. It must be resisted.
So there you go. Now, I ask you British people, you're going to have to stand up for your rights now, or forever hold your peace and expect anybody to come marching through your door at any time. Imagine being under martial law with that kind of law at soldiers' disposals. You're going to have to lock your daughters up, lock your children up, because they are going to be free to do just about anything they want to do if they believe they're acting in the interests of Britain. And who's going to hold them to account? Because apparently you can't even take them to court. This, I'm sorry, if there was ever a time for the British people to come out now is the time. Because this is just basically, they've drawn their swords. They have drawn their swords and they're ready to kill whoever. So, you know, come and kill me if that's what you're going to do, Boris Johnson and your mob. Okay, you're going to kill people like me who are speaking out for human rights, who are speaking out for sense and sanity. Well, I tell you now, the universe is with me and there will be hell to pay. You've took way a step too far here. This is disgusting. The Labour Party, I spit on you. I spit on you. You are the most disgusting, despicable, traitorous scum that ever sat in Parliament. Every single one of you who abstained from this vote and failed to vote it down and failed to stand up for what is right and decent and everything that the soldiers of World War II gave their lives for. And I'm sorry, Boris Johnson, but we don't want your sketch for a future done in 1942. We had our solid plans for a future laid in 1945, and we are the spirit. I am the living spirit of 1945, the living spirit of the grandfather that gave his life for this country, and all the men with him. And we will stand for our rights, and we will not tolerate this evil. And anybody in Britain that gives themselves rights and powers on the strength of this bill, no, you are a traitor. You're a traitor to your country. You're a traitor to your people. You're a traitor to humanity. You're a traitor to the universe itself and the universal law that was written as a beneficence for all of life and to uphold all the rights of life. And that's the step we should be moving in, not towards Saudi Arabia and chopping people up in embassies with covert agents. How dare this world condemn Saudi Arabia and at the same time tolerate this monstrous power now squatting in at number 10. Who is controlling Britain at the moment? Netanyahu? is Netanyahu, our Prime Minister Boris Johnson, because it seems to me that you are giving yourselves the right to behave as Zionist Israeli soldiers behave towards every single Palestinian citizen. Even right down now to giving councils the right to demolish people's homes on the strength of COVID-19. We do not like the powers that you are packing in your pockets. We do not like the fact that our democracy is crumbling before our very eyes. And why? For what reason? And this Brexit, a Brexit engineered and manufactured purely for the Crown Territory tax haven interest, nothing to do with the British people. A Brexit usurped, a Brexit exploited, like COVID-19, the beneficial crisis. And oh boy, haven't we seen the globalist powers of the world come together to help Britain along, to help Britain scrap our human rights, to help Britain scrap our democracy, to help Britain become a tax haven for the criminals and child abusers and mobsters of the world, to launder Europe's dirty, filthy money. Please share the information everywhere, people. Please. You know, I have not advocated riots or even mass protests. I have stated, and I'll state it time and time again, you show your face to this government. Step out on your doorstep. Let's have a celebration for our human rights weekly. And we'll take it from there. We will take it from there because we will retain our power. We will hold you to account, Boris Johnson. We want an inquiry and an investigation into the postal vote. And all of the laws and acts of parliament that you have created are null and void, while ever the suspicion, the lawfully evidenced suspicion of a rigged postal vote hangs over your heads. These are very dangerous times, people. Boris Johnson has sold out the people of Britain to take part in a mass gene editing experiment so they can refine and perfect their gene editing techniques. Who are they to be rewriting our DNA? Who are they? Vaccines are one thing, but new experimental biotechnology is quite another, and especially not to be tested and put in children at a far greater risk from impacts of that vaccine than anything that COVID-19 could ever throw at them. And they are testing on children 5 to 12 years old in Britain. Go and have a look at my previous videos. Now, how can anybody tolerate this? How can anybody? Why? Competition and Markets Authority, Environment Agency, Financial Conduct, all of these free to murder, kidnap, torture and murder people. As well as the Ministry of Justice, MI5, Police and the National Crime Agency, Immigration, HM Revenue, Customs and Serious Fraud Office, UK military forces who will be doing what? Martial law straight after Brexit they've got planned. I've shown you how many times, time and time again. Martial law is what they've got planned for post-Brexit Britain. A martial law with no human rights. A martial law with soldiers who are at liberty to commit to authorise secret crimes. But do the crimes even need to be secret when people have got no power even to go to a lawyer, or there's no lawyer will stand up for them, there's no court that will hear their case? And I do wonder about the kind of Europe that would leave the British people in the hands of such murderous tyrants as are now sitting at number 10. And I do wonder about the kind of people that will just accept this, that will just tolerate it. But fear not, people, fear not, because they can kill our bodies, but they will never kill our soul and spirit. And the lot of them, they condemn themselves to hell, because they will live and die in the hell of the future that they create. There will always be a living planet for the truly caring, loving people of planet Earth. Because we are more than these physical bodies, as Jesus taught us, and we are a Christian nation. And why are we a Christian nation if we do not believe the message that Jesus taught us? Do not fear. Stand up for your rights, people. Stand up for your rights, because we are the last living line of defence between the children of today and a future worth living for them and our planet. Because as I've stated, these people are half-wits. They are stupid, sick psychologists, antiquated psychologists with their antiquated plans and their antiquated ideologies. They're dead. They're dead men. They thrive on dead men's thoughts. They drink the dead men's wine. They are death. And, you know, I bring the living cross, the Celtic Christian cross of the 4 equinoxes within the circle of time, the living cross against their death cult instrument of Roman torture. And it is about time people understood the difference between the two. It is about time that we brought the spiritual into reality. Because let's face it, their spiritual is coming into reality, isn't it? A spirit of a cesspit, a spirit of filth, a spirit of child abuse, a spirit of murder and torture, a spirit of destroying our planet and then blaming the slaves. Oh, look, you're destroying the planet by having to drive to work every day, as if we ever had any bloody choice. Well, we get a choice, people, when we give ourselves a choice. And men like my grandfather and women like my grandmothers, they gave us a choice. And we made our choice to live like human beings, to live lawfully in a balanced economy, to live with compassion, to live within the context of law and rights. And nobody voted for this tyranny. Lies do not make a democracy. And this horror, and how dare the BBC so casually present all of this to the British people. How dare this lady be speaking on her own in Parliament, in front of absolute hostility. Absolute hostility. Because she's speaking up for our human rights, for democracy, for law. Well, what have you got to say about it, British people? What have you got to say about it? What have we got to say about it? This needs to be stopped in its tracks. This government, I'm sorry, they need to be arrested. They need to be arrested. This is an open criminal conspiracy against the British people. Stand up for your rights. You know, as I say, you clapped every week for your NHS. Have a celebration for your human rights every week. Let that be our protest, and let our cheers strike a chord of fear into the hearts of every one of the criminal tyrants that dared even pen such an evil bill as this.